Matt from Lawrence Systems here, and today we're getting started with Pangolin. Pangolin is a project from the team at Fossorial that provides a secure way for you to access home lab resources from pretty much anywhere and without having to punch any holes in your firewall. Think of it as a self-hosted version of Cloudflare tunnels on your terms. And by on your terms, I mean on the infrastructure of your choice. Pangolin makes use of several well-respected projects to create a tunnel from behind your firewall out to a server on the public internet that acts as a reverse proxy, providing you with access to the resources that you choose to expose. Now, I've been wanting to work on this video for some time now, but I also wanted to get a significant amount of time in with Pangolin and make sure that a handful of IT professional friends had some time with it too. So I granted them access to several services on my Docker host, which is why we're over here right now. Gotta turn it on, hold on. And we're on. Gave them access to some of the services that are on this machine and let them kick the tires. So let's just get started. Oh, no. One thing, really quick story, just because everything has a starting point, just like this tiny fern over here. Let me get to my desk first, though. All right, so I've got just a really quick story that I thought would be fun to share, and it's more of an image than anything else. I can't snap my fingers, but I know how to use Premiere. Okay, so this photo right here is a photo from this room about 25 years ago. That photo has got to be from the year 2000 based on a couple of things in it. A, there's hair gel, which means I still had hair. B, there's an ASP 2.0 book. And, well, the equipment itself just speaks for itself. You've got that Pixel, was it Pixel Vision? Or SpectraVision, I think was the name of the company. LCD from 2000, which is just insane to have. The Precision, what is it called? PowerMate. NEC PowerMate on the left-hand side. Some kind of tower that I built from pieces from computer shows that took place in Queens, New York in the late 90s and early 2000s. And most importantly, the Hewlett-Packard Net server on the right-hand side. That server is one I got from my first job at the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship 25 years ago, and it ran Windows NT4, and I installed remote access services on it. That is the machine, the first machine from my home lab that was used for getting into my network from when I was on the road or at work or wherever I happened to be. And over the years, it was replaced by a number of different hardware firewalls. Definitely had a couple of PIX models here. Lots of Sonic walls. I definitely had the 2040s and like 2040s or 3060s or something like that, and like an HA config and tons of other stuff. Overlay networks, it's what I've been using a lot right now to gain access, but 25 years ago was RAS. Today we're going with Pangolin. And I just think that's kind of cool. That's a quarter of a century of remote access. Enough of that, let's get back to today. Let's get started. Okay, getting started with Pangolin. By the time this video is done, we're going to have a working Pangolin instance, 3 different services from my Docker host running, and we're going to be able to test access through another browser. We're just going to use Firefox or something on my machine. That's more than enough for testing purposes. And like I said, getting started. So there's 3 things we're not going to cover in this video that will be covered in a future video. 1, we're not going to install CrowdSec. I'll explain why during the installation steps, and again, it'll be in another video. 2, I'm not going to work with an SMTP server because I don't have a need to, and I haven't found anyone that has had a need through the testing I've done over the past month. 3, I'm not going to be working with the raw TCP and UDP packet forwarding because, again, I have some ideas for another video and some really cool use cases that I want to detail in it, so we're going to keep that for another time. This is getting started, and what better way to get started than RTFM? That's it. We're going to go to the docs. Fossorial did an amazing job putting documentation together for the Pangolin project. All right, we need a Linux system with root access and a public IP address. In today's video, what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a virtual machine over at DigitalOcean. It's got 1 vCPU and a gig of memory. It cost me, I think it was $6 US a month to get up and running, and it's aligned with the suggestions from the team at Fossorial. I tried doing an installation on an instance that only had a half a gig of RAM, and it didn't go well. I was able to install Pangolin, but usage was a completely different story. So definitely start at that 1 gig plus place in RAM. The only other consideration I think you have with allocation of resources is how much bandwidth you're going to be using. That's going to differ based on the types of services that you choose to expose. If you're doing something that's media heavy, you might get hit with a heavy bill. So do a little calculation, figure out what it is that you're going to be using before you get yourself set up so that you're not surprised by a bill at the end of the month. No one likes those. We need a domain name that's going to point to the Pangolin server, and in this case, we're going to be using nsuta.wtf. That is nsuta.wtf, and we want to thank our friends over at the National Society for Unnecessary Technology Acronyms for allowing us to use the domain in this demo video. We really appreciate it. So we've got a system, we've got a domain that we can use and create DNS records in, and there's a couple of other things we're going to need. One, security. We're going to want to make sure that the virtual machine or whatever system you have out there on the public internet only has the ports available that need to be accessed. And as you can see in the documentation, 80, 443, and UDP port 51820. That port's used for establishing the WireGuard tunnel between your home lab and this system. The only other port that you'd probably want to have open is 22, so you can SSH in and do some of this work. I've gone ahead and created a firewall here in my DigitalOcean account, and it's set up to only allow inbound on 22, 80, 443, and 51820 on UDP. Oh, while we're here, check it out. This is the activity on my account, and you can see that I've really spent a lot of time building and destroying virtual machines for testing this out. And again, it's because I wanted to put together a getting started video that made good sense, but also because I really wanted to evaluate Pangolin for my own usage. And I have, and we'll talk more about that after we get going. Let's see, what here? Prereqs. We also need an email address for Let's Encrypt certificate registration, and the folks over at nsuta set me up with an email address too, so we're going to be using that. And optionally, an SMTP server. Like I said a moment ago, I'm going to be skipping that because I don't see a need for it right now, but we're going to cover setup and configuration of one in the follow-up video to this one. Installation steps. This is where things get great. There are two commands that we're going to have to use here. Well, there's three, but we're going to call them two. First, we're going to use this right here. wget pulls the installation script down to your system and makes it installable, or executable, excuse me. We're going to go ahead, boom, here's the machine. We're going to paste the command in and hit enter. All right. Ooh, look at that. It was done in a time before I could stretch. Now that we have the installer in place and chmod has made it executable, we're just going to run it. Oh, that's right. Run as root. Best practices, folks. Okay, here we go. Basic configuration. Enter your base domain. As I stated earlier, nsuta.wtf. nsuta.wtf. I love saying that domain. Enter the domain for the Pangolin dashboard. I've already created a record, pangolin.nsuta.wtf, and that just happens to be the suggested subdomain for use, so we're going to go ahead and hit enter. Enter the email for Let's Encrypt certificates, matt@nsuta.wtf. Do you want to use Sharable to allow tunneled connections? Yes, I do. Admin user configuration. I'm going to go ahead and use my nsuta email for this. You might want to use something different for yourself, but for demonstration purposes, it'll work today. All right. Let's just go ahead and put a little something in here. Disable sign up without invite. Default, yes. Again, if you're installing this in a home lab, you're probably going to want to just give friends and family, whoever it may be, access by giving them access manually. Here is a link to an account. There's no need in most cases for people to be able to sign up without an invite. So we're going to go ahead with a yes on that. Disable users from creating organizations. The default here is no, but I have not encountered a reason yet to allow or enable them or give them the ability to. And if they don't need it, I don't want them to have it. So we're going to disable it. Enable email functionality. No, we're skipping SMTP. Docker is not installed. Would you like to install it? Yes, please. All right, here's the big moment, folks. Default, yes. Okay, here we are, CrowdSec install. Would you like to install CrowdSec? As much as I would like to right now, I'm going to answer no. And I'll show you why. This installer constitutes a minimum viable CrowdSec deployment. CrowdSec will add extra complexity to your Pangolin installation and may not work to the best of its abilities out of the box. Users are expected to implement configuration adjustments on their own to achieve the best security posture. Consult the CrowdSec documentation for detailed configuration instructions. Are you willing to manage CrowdSec? Yes, I am, but not today. If you're not aware of what CrowdSec is a threat hunting platform that can identify and block malicious IPs in front of things like applications. It's something I've used in several high-performance hosting situations or setups for publishing industry stuff that I used to do with magazines in the past, and it's an amazing project. It absolutely is. But I want to make sure that it's configured properly in a Pangolin installation before implementing it. So it's out of scope for something that's considered getting started. But like I said, I've got my own instance. I'm going to get it set up for myself, and we're going to have a follow-up video. So for now, we're going to go with no, but we're going to turn that into a yes in the near future. All right, installation complete. There we go. Everything's installed. Let's see what happens. Pangolin.ensuda.wtf. Hey, first off, nice to see the SSL certificates in place from Let's Encrypt. That's awesome. Let's see, the password is something like this. Oh, hold on a second. Let's just try that again. All right. Whew. Would not want to have to rewind. All right, so let's get into the configuration. The configurations here is very, very straightforward. We're going to start off with an organization, and in this case, we're going to call it Nsuta, N-S-U-T-A. Now, you'll notice below that there's an organization ID. If there are spaces in the organization name, those will be changed over into dashes. Please do note, though, that once you've created an organization, you may be able to change its name, but you'll not be able to change its ID. So if you want something in there that's very specific to the organization that you're setting this up for yourself, whoever it may be, now's the time to decide what that's going to be. Ultimately, keep it simple. Create an organization. All right, now we're going to create a site. A site is a location where a tunnel is being created from. So for all intents and purposes, welcome to Nsuta headquarters. N-S-U-T-A HQ. Gotta love acronyms. Now, for the tunnel type, we have a few different options. Or we have two options, and then we have the option just to not use a tunnel at all. Tunnel type, we're going to go ahead with Newt. Newt is part of the Pangolin project, and it's essentially WireGuard with some stuff baked into it. We can also go with basic WireGuard, or we can go local. Local would mean no tunneling takes place. I may use something like Pangolin on a publicly accessible server to simply act as a reverse proxy for a number of applications or services that I have running with a layer of SSO on top of them. And that's actually kind of a cool thing to be able to do with this project. For today's demo, we're going to go ahead with a Newt tunnel, though, because we want to expose services here in my space. Now, Newt credentials. This is really slick the way this was done. We have some creds here, and it's going to be what Newt, the client, uses to connect to the Pangolin server. We've got the endpoint, which is pangolin.ensuta.wtf, and we have an ID and a secret key. Keep that information handy, record it someplace, and then go ahead and check I have copied the config, because you're not going to get past the screen till you do that. Now, with installation of Newt, we've got some really great options here. We have a number of different platforms and architectures we can work with. In this case, I'm going to be installing as a Docker container, and I'm going to be using Docker Compose. Here's my Compose file's contents, all ready for me to use. If you look up here, let's see, the ID starts with 4GG9. 4GG9. It's everything you already recorded, made convenient. So let's go ahead and pop onto Pi 5. I think we're going to use for this today. Yeah, let's use Pi 5. And we're going to head over to where I normally keep my Docker stuff. Actually, let's sudo I. Meet the Fockers. Go into my Newt folder here. I'm pretty sure I already got a Docker Compose file. Yep. And there's nothing in it because we were ready. All right, cool. We just pasted the configuration from the Pangolin UI in. I'm going to save it, close, and we're simply going to bring the Docker container up. All right, it's up and running. Let's get back to Pangolin. Everything here is fine. We can go ahead and create site. Now, it's going to take a couple of seconds for the tunnel to be established, so let's give it a few. Hey, online. There we go. It's always that tense little moment. It's almost like booting a domain controller that just takes a little bit longer than it should for some reason. Everything's fine, but just a few extra seconds. All right, now that we have our site in place, we can assign resources to it. Resources being the services that we want to expose. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and expose 3 different resources, and we're going to set them up a little bit differently each so that we can see how authentication works within Pangolin. All right, first off, let's start with, I don't know, Olama. We already have our site, ensita.hq. This is an HTTPS resource. Like I mentioned, we can also work with raw TCP and UDP resources, but we're going to save that for the follow-up video. HTTPS settings. We're going to go ahead and use a subdomain that I've already created a DNS record for, and that's going to be olama.ensuta.wtf. Create resource. All right, we now have a resource created. It is protected through HTTPS with an SSL certificate through Let's Encrypt. And we have to set up a target. Where does this go to? Where does this resource point at? And in this case, it's going to point at, let's see, 192.168.122.114 on port 3000. Because what we're actually granting access to is OpenWebUI, not Olama itself. It's just easier to refer to it as Olama because people are going to know what it is. All right, that is all set. If I had multiple machines here and I wanted to do some load balancing, I could add a second, third, n number of targets, and I would assume it round robins on something like this. I'm really not sure. Maybe we'll do that in the next video and see what we can do. That's actually pretty sweet, depending on the scale of what it is that you're granting access to. You also have some additional proxy settings. You can set a custom host header if you need. I would assume that's usually in use if you have an application that has specific expectations when it comes to sitting behind a proxy. All right, here we are at authentication for the resource. This is cool. We can set up your regular platform SSO, which is the username and password that I used to log into the control panel earlier. And we can set up roles as well as users. Now, I'm an admin in the system, so I don't have to assign myself to gain access, but if I had other accounts in a member's role and I wanted them to have access to this resource, this is how I would grant it. Authentication methods. You can allow additional authentication methods outside of system SSO to grant access to resources. You can use password protection or a simple PIN code. I think it's like 6 digits long or something like that. And we'll get to those with the next 2 resources. One-time passwords is also an option, and that's actually not a bad option. If you're worried about people sharing access to your resources, depending on who you're sharing with in the first place, that may be an issue, I don't know. You could use one-time passwords to help curb that. If everything's going to go to someone's email address, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to share. There are always ways to get around it. I'm just saying, if you're working with a small group of folks, that's a great way to curb access. And it's also just a great security, a layer of extra security. On-time passcodes can be debated, but it's here. If you want to use it, use it. Rules. This is sweet. You can enable rules very much like you would with a firewall. You can match based on IP address or a block of IPs, a URL that's being used to access the server, and decide to either grant or deny access based on it. You could really lock things down quite a bit, even potentially to specific IPs or maybe even a geography, if done right. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud about this right now, and maybe that'll be something that goes into the follow-up video as well. We're not going to mess with rules today. We have basic platform SSO in place for authentication, and we're good to go on this particular resource. Now I'm going to quickly get 2 more set up using the PIN code and password so we can see how those work once we're demoing. One, I believe. I'm going to save the target, and for authentication, we are going to add password protection. I watched Spaceballs this weekend, so we're going to go with the Schwartz. Yes, that's right. Okay. All right, that's good. Go back up to resources and create a 3rd resource. All right, pin protection is disabled. Let's add a pin code. I want to be slightly more secure than Spaceballs, so we're going to start with the number 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. Excellent pin code. Enable pin code protection. Oh, I never use that code, folks, please. All right, we have 3 resources in place. Let's get into access control really quickly. We're just going to go through this very briefly. It's creating users. If we want to create a user, click the Create User account, and you can have either an internal user or an external user because you can use external identity providers for authentication, which is pretty cool. And again, a little bit more than getting started. For our basic user, we can enter user information. Let's set Tom up. Let's use Tom's sudo email. We're going to make this invite valid for 3 days, and we're going to make him a member because I don't want him messing around my network too much. Create user. All right, that user has been added to the system. Well, not added, they've been invited. Now, what I'm going to do is just send Tom this link and say, hey, go ahead and register and I'll set you up for access with X, Y, and Z. It's as simple as that. Once a user has registered, they'll show up in this list, and there's not a whole lot you can do for them because everything's based on roles. Let's get to that next. Roles, this is very RBAC-like. We're going to create a role. Let's say I've got a team of, event planners. And I want to give them access to my project management system to allow them to use that for helping me manage an event that's coming up. Well, I'll go ahead and assign any resources for the event planners. Let's say Comfy UI. This way, go to authentication, roles, event planners. Now, anyone that is in the event planners group, or role, will be able to access Comfy UI. Roles work as simple as that. They're great. Sharable links. This is 100% about convenience, and as much as I love this feature and have been using it, especially in testing, it's one that you want to kind of just consider a little bit before you use. A shareable link grants access to a resource within Pangolin without any need for authentication for a set amount of time. So if I were to give someone a link that I'm creating right now for Blinko and have it expire in 30 minutes, they'll have access to that resource without having to authenticate for the next 30 minutes, or I think 30 minutes from when they actually try to access it. It's convenient, so convenient that you can give someone a QR code or a simple link. But you're going to want to make sure that you use this wisely. Make sure that if you're going to give someone a shareable link, it's to a resource that they're not going to be able to, say, gain access to other things with. You know, that's something you really need to use some trust on. Now, after shareable links, we've got API keys. This is used to authenticate with integration APIs. We're not going to do that in this video because, again, getting started. Settings, basic stuff here. Organization, danger zone. If you want to delete your organization's data, you go into the danger zone, you click the red button, and you do some other stuff. Actually, let's see what happens when you click. Okay, cool. So you have to type the org name before anything happens. That's pretty standard. Nice. Server admin. Again, very basic stuff here. It's really going to be mostly user management, the API keys again, and identity providers because you can use an outside identity provider that follows specific protocols. Pretty good stuff. License, if you are using this in a business manner and you want to license it, you can do that here. You also have the ability to buy a supporter key. And if this is a project that you use and you find is very useful, I suggest you do that. One last item before we move on to the demonstration of how Pangolin's actually working now that it's been configured, and that's that you can set up two-factor for your accounts. So once you have an account or once someone creates an account on your system, enable two-factor for yourself. All right, let's get to the fun part, actually using Pangolin to check out some services. I'm going to go ahead and open Firefox. I don't use it much on this machine. There's not going to be any sessions that are active, so let's see what happens. First things first, let's go to, not the dashboard, but let's go to Olama. That was the first one I believe we set up. Okay, here we go. Authentication required. Log in. Oh, just really quickly note that there are no specific options to choose other than standard authentication here. And you'll see why in a second. Log in. No. Hey, Storm, what's going on? How are we doing today? Let's see. Give me 5 facts about the pangolin. Hey, there are 8 species of pangolin? Scaly anteaters, unique defense mechanisms, excellent diggers. Well, tunneling, hello, right? That's why that's part of the reason the name was used. Scaling, tunnels, it makes good sense. All right, well, we can see that we were able to access Storm, one of the models on my Docker host. That's actually geared towards being very factual and stuff. That was pretty good. That was pretty good. Now that we have authenticated against Pangolin and we've seen Olama, let's jump into Blinko. Let's do Blinko next. Look at that. I didn't have to authenticate against anything because it already had a session token or cookie, whatever, in place from that initial login. Because again, single sign-on. Let's do that again in a private browsing window. Okay, now we're met with an authentication window, and check it out. We can use a password or user. User being SSO, password being what we set up before, which was the Schwartz. Right? Yeah, the Schwartz. May the Schwartz be with you. Boom. And we are now in Blinko and can log in and do what we want with it. And we'll go ahead and continue using the different authentication methods. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Highly secure. And no available server? What happened? What did I do wrong? Let's take a look at the Pangolin configuration and see what went wrong. Resources, Comfy UI, edit. Oh, I didn't set up a target? Well, maybe I didn't. I didn't hit save. And that would be part 8288, I believe. Target, save. Let's take another look. Authentication, clearly that we set up properly and everything else. Let's find that window and reload. Hey, there we go, Comfy UI. That was awesome. Made a mistake, fixed it. Things happen. Now, Comfy UI, you're going to take a little while to load because that poor machine is not exactly where you belong. But let's see what we can do here. Do I have a workflow that I could have fun with? I think this one? No? This one? Yes, cool. We do have a workflow we can work with today as a quick test. And no keys found. Great. Close. I believe I've already got a prompt in here. Yep. Baroque glitch core. A pangolin hacks a corporate data center. Data corruption, photograph damage. Oops, I didn't want to mess with that LoRa. That seems like it would be a little high up there. Let's lower that a bit. And we've got stable diffusion 1.5 working. Let's make a bunch of those. I'm going to grab a glass of water and let this generate, and we'll see what happens when I get back. Definitely got the Baroque glitch core kind of feel down pretty well. Goodness, these are interesting. Wow. Okay, so there you have it. We have a working Pangolin installation. It's been configured. We have a user account in there that's able to authenticate and gain access to 3 different resources that I've exposed from my main Docker host. We created a tunnel using Newt from a Raspberry Pi 5 that's literally just hanging here next to my microlab at the moment. And we're able to access everything through Firefox on my machine after authenticating using SSO, a PIN code, and a regular password. I would say that getting started with Pangolin, a mission accomplished. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I am going to create a follow-up that covers several other items, including CrowdSec, the usage of an SMTP server, and raw TCP and UDP packets going back and forth. I've got a couple of really great ideas on how that can be used. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out in the Lawrence Systems forums or the Discord. It's actually easier to find me in the Discord on most days. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions on how this is being used by myself or how you can use it for yourself. And until I see you next time, take care of yourself.